Hi, everyone, and welcome to another wonderful week of technical writing. In this week, we'll cover ethics in technical writing. Um, in the lectures and assignments, we'll do a little bit of authentic authorship work. And then on a more technical, maybe practical level, we'll be working with executive summaries, job descriptions, and evaluations as well. So a lot to cover this week. But before I get started, I wanted to say thanks for everyone's really hard work last week. Um, as I mentioned, I took a lot of what came up last week from kind of theoretical articles that are more written for other researchers or even educators in the field. And so I thought it would be a real challenge for you all, and I really do hope it was, but you really seem to handle it nicely. So really well done as always. Thanks for your hard work, and I'm looking forward to reading what you come up with for this week. So without any further ado, I'll share my screen and we'll get into our first lecture for the fourth week. So this one's titled Ethics in Technical Writing. You should have read the chapter in your textbook with, I think, the corresponding title, but I'll go over some of the highlights in this lecture as well. So when they talk about ethical considerations in the textbook, there's two really important quotes that come up front in the chapter at the very beginning. First, our authors write, ethical behavior, including ethical technical communication, involves not just telling the truth and providing accurate information, but telling the truth and providing information so that a reasonable audience knows the truth. And so this gets back for me to the first few lessons of the course. We talked about some of the techniques that can make information stand out, techniques like contrast, like bullet point lists, really strong headings. And we've talked about some of the methods for effective communication, including, really discerning the worthwhile content. And the truth is that behind all of those tactics should be a really strong sense of ethics, because in the same way that those tactics can be used to draw people's information to the correct and the accurate information, using those same techniques could be used to kind of undermine the audience and draw their attention to information that's not as valuable and that might obscure the truth. And so the ethical behavior they're talking about here, I think, gets really at the root of what we're talking about with those techniques and with those methods. And so just keeping in the back of your mind, whether you become a technical writer or just have to do parts of technical writing in whichever career path you take, that those same methods can draw people's attention away from really what's important, and that they should never be used for that purpose. They should be used, as it says here, so that a reasonable audience knows the truth. Now, we've talked a lot about these kind of phrases, both in discussions and in a couple of the lectures, but a reasonable audience is kind of tough to define in the same way that an expert is tough to define, that it's never, it's never one thing. Reasonable can mean a lot of different stuff, but at least having the different kinds of audiences in the back of our mind, drawing on that rhetorical situation stuff, rather. That's really what we need to do when we're using those techniques. And so wanted to draw your attention to that up front. They continue, and I'll get to more of this in just a second, but they say ethical writing then involves being ethical, of course, but also presenting information so that your target audience will understand the relative importance of information and understanding whether some technical fact is a good thing or a bad thing. And so you might have heard me use the phrase before in this course. I talk a lot about information architecture. Some of the experts in coding in our course might be able to speak more to this on their end, but information architecture includes like how information is presented on a website, which headings on a website contain which sub pages that you can explore. And so you can think about you could think about that setup and thinking about doing it ethically. And so you could think about Amazon or something like that. And do they bury the return tab somewhere really difficult to find? And is that ethical writing or ethical structuring of information? Perhaps not. But even on a smaller level, when we did our syllabi, there is a sense of information architecture there. Like, what is the most ethical, important information for a student to know at the beginning of a syllabus? And so I think on mine, I do course description first, but I get pretty quickly to info about myself and about who I am as an instructor, because I just see it as ethically important for you to know who I am and where I'm coming from. So those types of information architecture are also covered here, that what you put first might draw more attention than what you put last. And again, that's another technique where we have to think about, are we doing that in an ethical way where the most important stuff is up top? They use the Challenger case study in the textbook, which is a real thing. You can look it up. But yeah, there's good reason to believe that kind of unethical technical writing led to parts of that disaster. And so after that, they get into visual communication. And I wanted to introduce an article, and I'll give you the citation below as always, which is really where they're drawing from for that section. And the article is titled "Cruel Pies," short for pie charts. But "Cruel Pies: The Inhumanity of, I think, Visual Technical Communication," by Sam Dragga. And so at the beginning of that article, Dragga writes, "Indeed, we do a genuine disservice to students, clients, colleagues, and the public if we allow this limited definition of the ethics of visual communication to persist in the writing, teaching, and research we do as technical communicators. We need instead to broaden our understanding of this important subject by studying and developing a variety of techniques that will bring humanity to technical illustrations." And so what I wanted to get back to from this slide was that they start their quote with ethical writing, and Dragga here is broadening it out to technical communication and also thinking about technical illustrations. And so let me give you an example of what Dragga is going to talk about. In his article, he goes through a bunch of examples, but the article being from 2001, it's quite old now, which is okay. But here are two charts that are kind of what Dragga is talking about. This is a CDC chart of COVID-19 deaths in the US, where these lighter colors represent a lighter amount of deaths, and darker colors are where there were more deaths. And so what Dragga is saying is, when we use visualizations like this, we're not thinking about the humanity behind what's going on. And so we get this picture of maybe the numbers of deaths and vague outlines, states where it kind of stops and goes. But at the end of the day, you don't really understand the true suffering that COVID-19 caused to people who actually had it, to families, and so on. And so Dragga is saying, essentially, charts like these are unethical to start with, because we don't get any glimpse of the humanity behind these deaths, or how bad the suffering might have been because of COVID-19. We just get some lights and darker shades of colors that are supposed to tell us maybe some piece of data. Trying to move. Oh, let me go back. Trying to move my screen out of the way here. This is another chart. This is from the current conflict or invasion in Ukraine. And this chart is supposed to tell us civilians and military and unknown casualties. And again, Dragga would say, these lines, these numbers, the dates, it just doesn't really tell us much in terms of the actual human suffering that's going on. And so Dragga says, when we think about communicating this technical information, we need to think about how we ethically do it and honestly do it. Really is what's at the heart of his question. And so here would be an example of the opposite of what Dragga is talking about. I think this is one that tells us a little bit more about the suffering. And so again, we have the same kind of numbers from different dates in the war, I think. But in this chart, they give us actual pictures of Ukraine and what's going on in the corners here. And so while we still just get kind of numbers and colors up here, at the end of the day, we do get some glimpse into what the actual suffering looks like in Ukraine, and what people on the ground are really dealing with. And so this would be an example of a really good humanistic or ethical chart, I think, if we're thinking about what Dragga is saying. And so he concludes his article by saying technical communicators schooled in rhetoric and trained in the humanities are in a unique position to help raise the level of ethics in the visual display of technical information. We know how to adapt the technical to the human. And so ideally, you're all trained in rhetoric because E110 was a prerequisite for this class. But yeah, I hope this gives some insight into what we've been working with in this class. I've asked you to really reflect on yourselves a lot. And while that's not the humanities as a field, as Dragga is talking about, it is introducing a very human part of technical communication that again can be missed when we think about it as this effective kind of thing that's cold and detached, that produces charts like this instead of charts like that. And so that's how he concludes his article, and that's what your textbook was drawing on when they got into some of the visual technical communication stuff. So just to get back to the textbook for a second, and then we'll wrap things up here. At the very end of the chapter, they give you a link for the Society for Technical Communicators, which I've abbreviated here. But this is one of the professional organizations for technical communicators, and they have a series of ethical principles on their website, which you can go and look up. But they list these 6 ones. They talk about legality, which is kind of talking about just starting your technical writing with the question, is this legal? We've discovered some surprise ones in this course, I think. We discovered that things like nutrition facts are governed by certain guidelines and regulations to make them legal. We thought about the Plain Language Act. And if you're doing government communication, what's legal and what's required in that sense. And so while that might be a kind of clear ethical principle for a lot of people, there are a lot of nuances to it, especially with technical writing. Honesty is really a lot of what we covered here in this course, but it also includes your own personal honesty. Like if you're going to commit to a technical writing task, that you're upfront about what you can accomplish and in what kind of timeline you can accomplish it. Confidentiality, whether, again, you're a technical writer or just have to do some technical writing task in your job, the chances are you'll be dealing with some confidential information, whether it's information that you're just waiting to release to the public that's not ready yet, or whether it's information that will always remain confidential. Again, you have to think about how do you do that ethically and how do you do that properly? And again, it probably gets back to some of the roots of legality, like what legal requirements are there for keeping something confidential, which might be prominent in the news these days. But quality, again, that gets back to a little bit of what I said at the end of honesty, that what you're saying about what you can produce it matches your own quality as a writer, and what you are able to do, that you're not over promising or anything like that. Fairness, part of this, they talk about accessibility between cultures, which we'll get to next week, and I do want to talk more about it. So I'll leave that one for right now, but fairness in terms of access is definitely one of them. And then professionalism. So with a lot of the research I've mentioned, obviously those researchers are trying to move technical communication as a field forward, but when we talk about professionalism, it's that once you've started to do technical writing tasks, that you're thinking about how you can innovate technical writing, and you're thinking about how could you be a good role model or a good mentor for people who are going to follow in your path career-wise. And so we'll wrap up that lecture there. Thanks for listening, as always. And for this lecture, I think we'll do a discussion where I'll ask you to find more technical writing, but maybe we'll focus on visuals and kind of rhetorically analyze them, or let's say ethically analyze them from this point of view. So again, thanks for listening. And yes, we'll have 2 more lectures this week. Thanks, everyone.